Wanting to contrast the sport class between the jet class, spent some time with Rick VanDam, learned a lot from that session. You're very unique because you're flying in two different classes, one that corresponds to the plane and pilot audience with the sport class, and then also with the jet class. Two different things. Tell us a little bit about what it takes to go from, General Aviation Pilot on steroids to superstar pilot with the jet.
Well, it's quite a bit of difference, particularly running in the sport class with the engines we're running. Most of our airplanes are running in the Continental 550 or the Lycoming 540. So we actually, from that point of view, we're flying 200 miles an hour slower than the jets, but we have a lot more engine issues that the General Aviation Pilot deals with every day. Once we go to the jet aviation, the aircraft, the engines become quite a bit simpler, but the speeds become quite a bit higher. We're running this year, the top group running around 500 miles an hour, which requires, if we flew the perfect course, we would be pulling 4.5 Gs the entire way around the race course. I've been finding every race that at some point during the race, I am up about 6.1 Gs. And that's due to the speed, and also when we get a little wind, the wing loading and the bumping that goes on just in the turbulence that you feel. So we're flying at the same altitude, generally between about 60 and 150 feet. So the jet, when it goes through this turbulence, hits it a lot harder than what you're experiencing in your general aviation aircraft. So it what's a little bump here is a violent jolt in the jet, and then it's adapting the speed, so you can vary your eyeballs onto what kind of turn radius you're going to have on the turns. Obviously, at 300 miles an hour, we're turning a lot tighter than we are at 500 miles an hour. So that comes into a lot of planning and a lot of experience. But the main thing that, looking at it from a general aviation point of view, is when I go to the jet, I go with more speed but less engine issues. I get slower, and they become more of the engine issues. And when we start up running in the super sport with the highly modified airplanes, then we have a lot of other things going, because when we're running up in that class, we're not only running the general aviation engine the way you would normally fly it at home. We've also added spray bars to water to throw onto the motor. We've added ADI alcohol into the motor, where some people are working with nitrous to inject that into the motor. Well, all of these are different levers with different fluid levels in them, so we have to manage that system as we're flying with 8 other airplanes around us in what we kind of casually refer to as our 9-ship non-cooperative formation. We're kind of like the Blue Angels flying formation, but we don't want the guy next to us. So while you're managing the system, you're worried about where the guy is next to you. So we spend a lot of time training the pilots for the formation and the low altitude work, so they can manage their airplane, manage their system, and they don't become task saturated while they're on the race course. We try to get them to focus on what they need on any given moment, between the formation, between being close to the ground and being prepared if there is an emergency. One of the things we find here with the rookie, the new guy coming into the sport, is that I do have to say something nice about the jets. In the 9 years of running jets out here, we have not had one single mayday with the aircraft, because when you go to the turbine power, our mechanical reliability of the systems has gone way up. When we're dealing with the internal combustion engines, there's a lot more going on with the engine. So maydays become a much more serious concern about that. So when we go through our Pylon Racing seminar in June, we spend a lot of time teaching formation, the basic formation. The next avenue we work on is maydays and aircraft malfunction. You only have several seconds to react and very limited energy to try to get your airplane up away from the ground and in a condition to land the airplane safely. So there's a lot of techniques that we as the experienced instructors try to bring into this and start making the pilot put this into part of their thought process. A lot of us, after we've flown for a while, we don't have any problems with the aircraft, so we kind of tend to bypass the systems knowledge and the orientation of what we would do when we have something wrong. What we do here with the race pilot, we tell them that you are going to have something go wrong and you better be ready for it. And what we've found is that the general thing in the novice is that there is a certain amount of time when the aircraft starts to malfunction, whether it be a high temperature, a low fluid level, a surging, a loss of power. There's a certain amount of denial that the pilot sits there and says, this couldn't possibly be happening to me. I was so nice to my aircraft last night. I polished my aircraft last night. My aircraft must love me.
Now, is that the same thing that would happen, though, to a general aviation pilot who has an engine failure or something else as denial?
It is exactly the same thing. And that we find out here, we do an extensive research on all the Maydays, and we ask them to do a report. And we call it the denial period. And the denial period will exist anywhere from 5 to 30 seconds of something happening before the pilot gets it into his conscious that he needs to react toward that situation. So by reducing it back from the 30 seconds, we are giving him more survivable opportunities. We don't practice every day in general aviation for a takeoff aboard, but that is actually one of the most serious times because you have very few seconds to react before it could become catastrophic. So we try to train the pilot and get him more attuned to responding to that situation. We don't want it to happen, but the environment of racing anything is you're going to have more of that occur. And we've been very successful out here in that our ability to, through the training process for the general aviation pilot, we're able to bring them up to a standard, put them more on their game so they become much more attuned to handling the aircraft and any emergencies that might result from it. We've had several pilots leave here and have gone on and just had Maydays on their own and have had very successful outcomes, and they've written us or called us and said it was the emergency training we had here at Reno that I knew what to do and had a successful outcome. And we orientate the program for the novice pilot coming in here. We spend, when we get them in June, we spend the first 4 days working on basic formation where we can get them covered in formation. Then we start working on the emergency procedures and their procedures, all before we start working on them learning to race. Because once we get them close to the ground, we give up a lot of our opportunities for recovery. So if we can get them their standards up, and we've been very successful taking general aviation pilots, anyone that has an interest in racing, to get in touch with us, show up out here, and we grab them with a very dedicated instructor staff to take their skill levels up several levels of what they're used to flying back home at the airport. And even if they don't turn into a race pilot, the skill levels they pick up on this are very valuable for their everyday flying experience.
For Plane and Pilot from Reno 2009, I'm Mark Chiolis.